June 28, 1914, dawn breaks over Sarajevo, and the city hums with anticipation. Streets lined with onlookers, flags hanging from balconies, the air thick with excitement and something harder to name, something tense, as an open-top motorcade rolls slowly through the narrow streets, carrying Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and beside him, his wife Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, smiling gently at the crowd, unaware that history is closing in around them. Car moves forward, engines humming, boots marching, whispers spreading through the crowd. Then suddenly chaos. A young man steps forward, raises a pistol, and fires. Two sharp cracks echo through the street. The Archduke slumps. Sophie collapses beside him. The crowd freezes, then erupts into panic, screams cutting through the air, confusion swallowing the moment. And in those few seconds, in that single act of violence, the world shifts, because what happened on this quiet morning would not stay in Sarajevo. It would ripple outward, pulling nations into conflict, igniting alliances, and within weeks, it would plunge the world into the devastation of World War I, a war that would claim millions of lives and reshape the course of history forever. Europe in the years leading up to 1914 was not at peace. It was a continent simmering beneath the surface, a fragile balance of power held together by uneasy agreements and deep mistrust, where powerful nations had divided themselves into rival camps. On one side stood the Triple Entente, an alliance of Britain, France, and Russia, and on the other, the Triple Alliance led by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, each side watching the other, preparing, arming, waiting. As nationalism surged across borders, people began to identify more with their ethnicity and culture than with empires. Militarism took hold, armies expanded, weapons stockpiled, and war plans drawn up in anticipation of an inevitable conflict, while imperial rivalries pushed nations to compete for power and influence across the globe. But nowhere was the tension more dangerous than within the crumbling Austro-Hungarian Empire. A vast and unstable state made up of many different ethnic groups, each with their own identity, their own ambitions, and their own growing desire for independence, especially among Slavic populations, who looked toward Serbia as a symbol of unity and resistance, as Serbia openly supported Slavic nationalism and sought to expand its influence in the Balkans, directly threatening Austria-Hungary's control, turning the region into a powder keg, where a single spark could ignite a chain reaction. And by 1914, that spark was no longer a question of if, but when. At the center of it all was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a man often misunderstood, yet destined to shape the future of an empire he would never rule. As the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he stood next in line to become one of the most powerful figures in Europe. But unlike many in the ruling elite, Franz Ferdinand did not fully embrace the rigid, traditional structure of the empire. Instead, he supported reforms that would grant greater autonomy to the various ethnic groups within it, particularly the Slavic populations, a vision that alarmed powerful figures who feared it would weaken their control and unravel the empire from within, making him a controversial figure even among his own people. Yet beyond politics, there was a deeply personal side to his life, defined by his marriage to Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, a union based on genuine love rather than political convenience. But one that came at a cost, because Sophie was not of royal blood. Their marriage was considered unequal, forcing her to be excluded from many royal privileges, a constant reminder of their place within the strict hierarchy of the court. And while Franz Ferdinand remained a powerful figure, he was not universally admired, disliked by some for his blunt personality, mistrusted by others for his reformist ideas. He was a man caught between tradition and change, authority and resistance, making his presence both significant and divisive, and his death far more consequential than anyone could have imagined. But this was no random act of violence. It was the result of a carefully laid conspiracy, driven by a young man named Gavrilo Princip, a frail, determined nationalist who believed he was fighting for the future of his people. Princip was a member of Young Bosnia, a secretive movement made up of students and activists who dreamed of freeing Bosnia from the control of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and uniting it with a greater Slavic state. But their ambitions did not exist in isolation, because behind them stood a far more dangerous force, the Black Hand, a shadowy Serbian nationalist organization with ties to elements within the military. Committed to expanding Serbian influence and undermining Austro-Hungarian rule, it was through this network that weapons were secretly smuggled across borders. Pistols, bombs, and cyanide capsules passed quietly from hand to hand, slipping into Bosnia under the watchful eyes of authorities who suspected nothing. As the conspirators prepared for their moment, studying the Archduke's planned visit to Sarajevo, mapping out his route, positioning themselves along the streets where his motorcade would pass. Each assassin assigned a role, each moment calculated, their goal clear and unyielding, to strike at the heart of imperial power by killing its future ruler. And as the date approached, tension built among them, fear mixing with resolve, because they knew the risks, they knew the consequences, but they also believed that one act, one decisive blow, could change the course of history forever. The morning unfolds with a sense of uneasy anticipation as the Archduke's motorcade winds its way through the streets of Sarajevo, a carefully planned route along the Appel Quay, where crowds gather to witness the royal visit, unaware that danger waits among them. The cars move slowly, giving onlookers a clear view of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, who continued to acknowledge the crowd, composed and unaware. Then suddenly, the first strike. One of the conspirators steps forward and hurls a bomb toward the Archduke's car, but in a twist of fate, it bounces off the folded roof and explodes beneath the vehicle behind them, injuring several officers and bystanders. Chaos erupts, smoke fills the air, screams echo through the street, but the Archduke's car speeds away, escaping the attack, shaken but alive. Plan, it seems, has failed, yet instead of leaving the city, Franz Ferdinand makes a decision that will seal his fate. He insists on continuing the visit, even choosing to visit the wounded at the hospital, a gesture of duty or perhaps defiance. But as the motorcade sets off again, confusion takes hold. The driver, unaware of a change in route, makes a wrong turn into a narrow street. And in that moment, everything changes because standing just a few steps away, by pure coincidence, is Gavrilo Princip, the young conspirator who had moments earlier believed the mission had failed. Now suddenly face to face with his target, time seems to freeze, then instinct takes over. Princip steps forward, raises his pistol and fires 2 shots, sharp and final. The first strikes Sophie, who collapses instantly. The second hits the Archduke, mortally wounding him. The car lurches forward as panic erupts once again. Sophie lies dying beside him, and Franz Ferdinand, his voice fading, turns to her and whispers his final words, pleading for her to live, unaware that both of their lives are slipping away, and in those brief, chaotic seconds, through a series of mischances, wrong turn, and chance encounters, destiny and disaster collide, sealing a moment that will echo across the world. The shock of the assassination ripples outward with astonishing speed, and within hours, the tragedy in Sarajevo is no longer just a local crisis, but a political earthquake, as leaders of the Austro-Hungarian Empire react with outrage and fury, viewing the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand not only as an attack on the royal family, but as a direct challenge to their authority. Suspicion quickly turns into accusation, and all eyes point toward Serbia. A nation already seen as a threat due to its support for Slavic nationalism, Austrian officials argue that the assassination could not have happened without Serbian involvement, whether directly or indirectly, and demands for action begin to grow louder. Yet behind Austria-Hungary stands a powerful ally, Germany, which offers what would later be known as the blank check, a full and unconditional promise to support Austria-Hungary, even if it meant going to war. A decision that emboldens Vienna to take a far more aggressive stance. And as diplomatic messages are exchanged, ultimatums prepared, and accusations intensified, the fragile balance that had kept Europe from war begins to collapse. Tension spreads from one capital to another. Alliances are quietly activated, and what began as a single act of violence in a distant city now threatens to engulf the entire continent, as the countdown to a much larger conflict begins. Faster and more unstoppable than anyone had imagined. What follows is not a pause for reflection, but a rapid, unstoppable chain reaction, as the leaders of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, backed by the confidence of Germany, make their move. And on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary formally declares war on Serbia, turning a political crisis into open conflict. But Serbia is not alone, because to the east, Russia, driven by its role as protector of Slavic nations, begins to mobilize its massive army in defense of Serbia, a decision that sends alarm bells ringing in Berlin, where Germany sees Russian mobilization not as a defensive act, but as a direct threat, and within days, Germany declares war on Russia, widening the conflict even further. Yet the escalation does not stop there, because Russia is allied with France, and Germany, determined to avoid a war on 2 fronts, quickly declares war on France as well, setting its military plans into motion. And as German forces move westward, invading Belgium to reach France, another power is drawn in United Kingdom, which had pledged to defend Belgian neutrality, now enters the war, transforming what began as a regional dispute into a full-scale global conflict. Alliances lock into place, armies mobilize across continents, and within a matter of weeks, the major powers of Europe are at war, bound by commitments they can no longer escape, and all of it. Every declaration, every mobilization, every invasion traces back to those 2 gunshots in Sarajevo, the moment that ignited World War I, proving how quickly a single act can spiral into a catastrophe that engulfs the world. In the end, what began as a single act of violence on a quiet street in Sarajevo did not remain contained. It spread across borders, across continents, pulling nations into a conflict they could not escape. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand did more than end 2 lives. It unleashed a war that would consume the world. As World War I raged on, millions of soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Entire cities were reduced to ruins, and the map of Europe was redrawn. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, along with other powerful empires, collapsed under the weight of the destruction, giving rise to new nations, new tensions, and a new, uncertain global order. And in the years that followed, the consequences of that war would continue to shape the modern world in ways few could have imagined on that June morning. A reminder that history is not always driven by grand plans alone, but sometimes by moments of chance, decisions made in seconds, and events that spiral beyond control, because in the end, a wrong turn, a missed bomb, and 2 gunshots changed the course of history forever.